The Motor Dream podcast is recorded on Camaragal land of the Eora Nation. It always was and always will be the lands of the First Nations of Australia.
This is the Motor Dream podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 31 of the Motor Dream podcast. I'm Connor McNally and thank you for joining me on the show where we can dream just a little about what our dream garage would be if money was no issue whatsoever. On our last episode, we went down the Formula One path as I caught up with Australian Formula One Academy driver Ava Anagnostiadis. Given the current Formula One buzz, largely due to Oscar Piastri's recent achievements, I decided to continue with this theme for this episode of the podcast. My guest today is incredibly lucky to photograph the most memorable on and off track moments of each Grand Prix. Additionally, he is one of only 2 Australians who cover the sport full time. More about my guest shortly. But first, here's the premise of what this is all about, especially for our new listeners to this podcast. I tell my guests that one day they wake up to discover that they've received a text telling them they need to check their bank balance. They then open up their bank app and they suddenly discover that they're instant billionaires. As soon as they discover their newfound fortune, they get an email from this mystery benefactor that tells them that they can spend anything that they like and they can buy any car, bike or machine that they want. But there is a catch though. They are only allowed 3 cars, bikes or machines in their dream garage. It sounds easy, doesn't it? But trust me, as my previous guests have told me, it is very difficult to decide. As always, be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast on your favourite podcast platform and be sure to leave a review and tell us what you think of the show. And also, be sure to follow us on our socials, which we'll tell you more about at the end of the show. 2025 marks 45 years since an Australian driver last won the Formula One World Championship, and since 2002, our nation has been represented full-time on the grid by Mark Webber, Daniel Ricciardo, and more recently, Jack Doohan and Oscar Piastri. It's a sport that until the advent of both social media and Drive to Survive, has struggled to maintain a mainstream presence beyond the Australian Grand Prix. But the recent successes of Webber, Ricciardo and Piastri have changed that mindset. In fact, Piastri's recent success with McLaren has helped push the young Melburnian and the sport itself front and centre of the news headlines. The Australian presence on the racetrack has extended to the media circus that follows the World Championship. Only 2 Australians have full-time accreditation to report on the sport, both back home in Australia and abroad. They are Matt Koch, formerly of Speed Cafe and now for Planet F1, and the other is making a positive presence behind the camera, as well as providing a social media presence from behind the lens itself. His name is Kym Illman. Kym has been following the sport since 2017 and got the inspiration to photograph Formula One whilst attending the 2016 Formula One Abu Dhabi Grand Prix as a guest of Red Bull. Already recognised for his work in nature photography, Illman applied for accreditation to the FIA purely as a fluke. As it so happens, the FIA gave him the green light and he's been a regular mainstay ever since. You may have seen his work online or in print, and you may not have realised that it was him that took the winning shot of Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen or even Oscar Piastri. This is where his business entrepreneurial skills came into play, stepping out from behind the lens and having his own YouTube channel, giving a behind-the-scenes account of what goes on in the world of Formula One. At last count, his channel has over 468,000 subscribers and counting, and his social media presence is just as huge, with a collective following of 1.2 million accounts across both Instagram and TikTok. When you add in an online shop that sells much of his photography to fans, plus merchandise, Illman has built a very strong fan base. This has also gravitated to mainstream media, where he has become the go-to man for all things Formula One. He's featured on programs such as The Project on Network 10, The Morning Show and Sunrise on Channel 7, 9 News and TVNZ. Some would say he's a very lucky man, but in truth, he's a very smart human being who's been able to use both the media and public persona to his advantage. You see, Kym didn't really grow up following motorsport or cars in his younger years in Adelaide. This all happened much later in his life, but he was able to utilise the opportunities that were given to him throughout his life and in business when they popped up. His first taste of Formula One came way back in 1998 at the Australian Grand Prix in Melbourne, when he thought of a novel way to ambush the F1 paddock with a promotional model wearing nothing more than a bikini and body paint displaying messages on hold. Remember that company? That was and remains Kym's pride and joy. The stunt caused such a stir that it brought in not just a little bit of notoriety, but also loads of business for Illman. The ambush marketing carried across all forms of sport, and whilst the TV networks were rather annoyed by this ambush, it certainly didn't hurt Illman's reputation as a smart businessman. Such is the success of Messages on Hold, it's now a self-sufficient business in its own right, and it allows Illman to focus on his other passions. Other than photography, he's dabbled in motorsport as a driver and team owner. He entered the 2009 Bathurst 12 Hour, where his team finished 5th outright, and he's also contested Targa Tasmania on a few occasions. In fact, he survived an RC crash in 2012 that almost cost him his life. Thankfully, he lived to tell the tale. These days, he's more than happy to take snaps behind the camera at every Grand Prix and give his online followers a taste of what life is like in the world of Formula One. When we recorded this interview back in February, it was around the time the 2025 Formula One season was about to roar into life. So some of the things that we mentioned in our chat have certainly changed in the few months since. Nevertheless, Kym Illman is certainly one of the more interesting guests I've had on the Motor Dream podcast. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy my chat with Kym Illman. Australian F1 photographer Kym Illman, welcome to the Motor Dream podcast. It is an absolute pleasure to have you on.
Good to be here, my friend.
Mate, you have been following the Formula One circus. In fact, you're one of only, I think, 2 Australians that follow the F1 circus full time, the other one being Matt Kosh from Speed Cafe. But you've become quite a bit of celebrity in your own right. You've been the person that many media organisations have gone to when it comes to everything that's Formula One. But you're a very lucky man to take a lot of great shots that have popped up on social media. And in fact, one of the first shots that I saw of you last year was of when Dr. Brian May went to the British Grand Prix as a guest of Formula One when the movie was unveiled.
Oh.
And that was my first introduction to your work, and I've been following you ever since. You must feel very privileged to be following the Formula One circus.
Yeah, I'm very lucky. I just decided at some point after going to the 2016 last race of the year, Abu Dhabi, I was a paying guest with Red Bull, and I was down in the paddock and I had the headphones on. I was listening to Daniel Ricciardo talk to his engineer. I thought, oh, this is fantastic. And at that point, I just decided, I'm going to photograph this sport. And I contacted the FIA pretty much after I got back from that trip, said, here's what I think I could do for the sport. And look, they said yes. They said yes initially to just pre-season testing in Barcelona, which was great. And then I said, can I apply for the first race? And they said, well, it's Australia, a home race. Yeah, we'll do that. And then I said, right, I applied for the next 2. And then on the 3rd race, I was standing talking to Mark Sutton, or I was listening to Mark Sutton talk to another photographer, and Mark has an agency. And this guy couldn't help him. And I just happened to be in the right spot. And I said, Mark, can I help you? And he said, yeah, do you want to shoot for us this year? I said, yeah, all right. So, look, I'd like to tell you there was 25 years of hard work to get up to this point, but no, it was just an absolute fluke. And I've done 7 seasons now, and I'm just in awe of the sport.
It has grown exponentially over the last, I guess, 7 to 8 years, particularly with the advent of Drive to Survive. And that has just really brought a brand new audience. Although you and I have followed the sport for a very long time, so we were there before Drive to Survive came along. Are you surprised with how much the sport has exploded in the way that it has, especially in the United States?
Surprised and delighted, because the US market is huge for me. About 50% of my income comes from those customers. And I tell you, very little comes out of Europe. So I'm quite delighted that the US, and really they're only putting their foot in the water at the moment. They're interested, but they're not committed. When this movie comes out, I think that'll add X million more. Another Drive to Survive season comes out late this month. Just everything works together to increase the fan base of the sport. So, yeah, I think I'm in at the right time.
The 2025 season, I want to touch on that because it is going to be a very interesting season for so many reasons. It's the last under the current hybrid regulations. We go to new regulations in 2026. Red Bull go into it as drivers world champions, but they're not constructors world champions, and they've struggled throughout 2024. We know the dramas with Sergio Perez. Max Verstappen's got a new teammate in Liam Lawson, but there's no guarantees that he's going to win the World Championship because McLaren are in really good form at the moment. When you look at Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, it's hardly surprising to see them why they won the Constructors' World Championship last year. There's so many factors that could play into this. What are you sensing from 2025 coming up?
I'll be honest with you, I know very little about cars. And I know yours is a car show, so this is quite ironical.
Really? This surprises me because I've looked up your biography, and it's quite an interesting tale.
I'm a mug. I'm a mug when it comes to cars. But what I do know is people, and I know what they want by just trying things on social media and working out what works and what doesn't. Who would have thought McLaren would have been where they were at the end of the year if you just took the start of the year? And so if you have a look at the start of this year, you might have a team doing lousy for the first 6 races, write them off, and then bang, they're up the pointy end come the end of the season. In terms of what do I think this year, I did a predictions video, which surprisingly has had well over 100,000 views for just what I think. And I just threw in a few red herrings in there just to fire a few people up, and it did. Like I had Liam Lawson down at 12th and Carlos Sainz at 17th. I had Lewis at 2nd, and I picked Lando to win. I think Lando's certainly a strong contender, and the bookmakers will say he's equal favourite with Max Verstappen. None of us know. It's just the lovely thing about this sport. We've got all these new drivers in. They all can't be great. One of them will probably struggle, maybe a couple of them. Will any of them go the way of Logan Sargent getting sacked halfway through the year, or Nick de Vries the year before? That's what makes this sport so interesting. And it's a blood sport, really, when you look at how these guys come in and they're all gung-ho and excited about it at the start, and then at some point there's a number of them that just have to be flicked. And it's a sad thing about the sport, but that's life.
It is life, but it's interesting. Like, everyone's now focusing on Jack Doohan being that next person that could potentially be flicked in the same manner as Logan Sargent and Nick de Vries. And he's given basically six races to perform at Alpine, which I think is a bit unfair. But like you said, it is a blood sport. So Jack really needs to perform from the very first race. And there's a lot of pressure on him.
Well, Jack's lucky because he's in that spot. Franco's not. Franco has to hope that things go bad for one of the two drivers. If Jack just makes a stunning debut and comes out of the box bouncing, well, that's all he needs to do. So, yeah, look, I love both of those guys. I dined with them and I catch up with them at races. And I think they're both tremendous fellas. I'd love to see both of them racing, but I'm not sure that will be the case at the end of the year. But certainly the sport is the better for having these interesting tussles going on because it keeps people excited and the media gives us something to talk about.
And you have a lot to talk about when it comes through your photography. You've provided some very, very good photos in the past. Where did that love of shooting motorsport photography come from? Because I read it on your biography, it says you took it as a bit of a hobby and then obviously it became now a full-time career amongst all the other things that you do. So where did that love first come from?
I'm sitting in a house that's on the beach in Lancelin, 90 minutes north of Perth. And we built this house, and this is a town of 730 people, and there's nothing to do. There's the ocean, plenty of great fish out there to catch, but it's bloody windy. I wish I'd loved windsurfing because this is paradise. And then I thought, no, I'll start a website up for Lancelin and I'll take photos of the place and I'll do a Facebook page and Instagram. So I would just spend my weekends photographing when I'd come up here from Perth. But at some point, we decided to move up here full time. I don't spend any time in Perth really anymore. And photography was just something I did. Then, of course, I did my wildlife book in Africa, which was fantastic. And then I thought, no, I don't want to do that anymore because that's bloody expensive. Although no cheaper than F1 or more expensive. It's about the same price. And then, as I said, I just decided that it might be a fun thing to do to shoot this sport. And I was right.
And it has worked out beautifully because you've now been, as I said, a go-to person. You've been, I guess, an expert for Channel 9 on 9 News in Western Australia and also in Adelaide. But also you've been on the project on Network 10, giving your insights in Formula One. There must be some benefits being able to provide an Australian perspective on the sport.
Benefit for me, yes, definitely. I get to sell my stuff. I get to sell things like calendars and these monstrous. Look at this bloody book here. It's 4 kilograms, absolutely
Oh
huge.
my goodness! Wow.
So I do that, but my business model is something quite unique in so much as I have all these different revenue streams. I work for commercial clients at the track. I submit my images to Getty for distribution worldwide. I do merchandise. I do books. Speeches, all sorts of things. So yeah, look, being known is certainly a very powerful part of that because look, I'm not the best photographer in the world, but I've got an audience, and that's more important than being the best photographer in the world.
Absolutely, I agree with that. And I guess you're competing against a lot of like social media influencers and those that are really specific on Formula One. So you're in a niche market, and does it feel like you have to compete against those other people to get that attention, or you're just running your own race and just going down your own lane?
Those social media influencers are people who sit at home in their bedrooms and they just pontificate or postulate about what might happen. I don't do any of that. I just go to the track and I tell people, hey, I saw this today. I was in the car park in Lando and Carlos got together and one of them did this. And that's all I know is what I see. And I figure no one else is out there. Sometimes I'm the only one. Sometimes I'm the only one in a paddock that gets to witness something happen there. So I've got this amazing access and I'm happy to share it with people. So my recipe is nothing more than telling people what I see.
I love that. That's a really good insight. I think it's great.
And that's about all I can do, Connor. Really. I'm no great car pundit. I can't tell you what's going to happen next week. Not that anybody can.
Look, I wouldn't sell yourself short here because like you've been doing Formula One photography for since 2017, but it has to be said that you've been involved in the media since the 1980s. And in fact, you were an audio engineer originally for Channel 9 in Adelaide. So you would have been around at the time when the Australian Grand Prix was on, and did you have the opportunity to be a part of the broadcast team, like behind the scenes working on the broadcast for Channel 9? Really?
No, I was a very ordinary audio engineer for 2 years at Channel 9 in Perth. Prior to that, I did 5 years on radio in Darwin, which I thoroughly enjoyed.
Yeah.
And then I got sacked from Channel 9, started my own business, Messages on Hold, got that up to a point where it runs beautifully without me, and this was just another thing I decided. Well, look, you know what? I didn't even think I would do 7 years. Maybe I thought I could do 1, maybe 2, but certainly not 7 seasons going into 8.
Wow, and that's a good story. And I want to touch on Messages on Hold because anyone that has been around sports advertising or watched the cricket or the AFL in the past, especially when there's games in Perth, they would have seen the Messages on Hold signs everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know this was your business, Messages on Hold, because it started in 1988 for those that don't know, and it's just exploded internationally. And it was just by virtue of doing what you said was ambush advertising. You put your name on so many different things. A lot of people didn't know that it was just advertising, but you did some pretty wild campaigns, especially at the Australian Grand Prix in 1998. Yes. Tell us about that story because it is an absolutely crazy story, which was well before social media. And I remember these particular models that turned up in nothing but body paint with Messages on Hold written.
Well, the first year, and I can't even tell you the year, so thank you for reminding me it was at the end of the 20th century. So the first year I decided I'll body paint this girl, and I went and found a body painter that I thought was good in Melbourne. Turns out he was shocking and he was hopeless. But anyway, we body painted her in a hotel just across from the track, and then I had tickets for the paddock, and I got a pit walk. And so we marched her across like in high heels. She was completely naked bar a G-string, and she was body painted with my logos and a few other sponsors' logos that we got involved. And then we got down, we were waiting in the queue for the pit walk, and security's twigged. And they've come over and they've said, what's going on here? And they said, oh, you can't come in. So I've had to ring my guys at Arrows, which was the team that had agreed to have us in there. And they had to come down and just say, no, he's fine, he can come in. So we came in. She was posing with both of the drivers in the garage, and of course there's 60 or 70 photographers going wild. And the next year what did we do? We did it next year. We did a girl with tyre tracks
I
in
saw
black
that. Yes.
final cut, top and bottom with a bikini on. And the third year, I made a bikini out of model car tyres from a company called Barago in Italy. And I just said, look, I want to do this, and sent them the previous 2 years. And they said, yeah, right, have as many as you want. And I made this very simple bikini, which I actually trotted out and used in Brazil. Going back a couple of years ago, I took that along and I got a girl to photograph. This was when I was photographing Formula One.
Wow.
But I could only do that outside the gate. I didn't want to put anyone off or get in trouble with the FIA. So, yeah, look, I've always been good at those ambush stunts. We ambushed cricket, AFL, obviously, that was what we're famous for.
Yeah, of course.
Grand Prix, Melbourne Cup, all sorts of stuff. Tennis. And even the Olympics. I had a guy go across the LA Olympics. But we're very good at it, and primarily it was me that drove it. But in the end, I lost a bit of interest in that, and the business was going so well, I didn't need to worry about it.
Exactly. But I do remember that campaign. How was your involvement with Arrows at the time? Because Arrows was owned by the late Tom Walkinshaw, and he obviously was trying to get sponsorship to sponsor the team, and they were in a bit of a funk at the time. They'd just lost Damon Hill, I think, from memory. Mm-hmm. And this would have been a great advertising campaign for TWR, just as much as it was for you at the time.
Yeah, and also they had this big black prince who was going to inject a lot of money. I don't know where he was from. Well, that all turned out to be a whole lot of rubbish. And he never fronted up with any money, but he was there for at least one of those campaigns. But after 3 years, we decided we wouldn't do it anymore, and you'd never get away with it today.
No, exactly. And you don't see those kind of those promotional activities anymore, because it's a very different sport now to what it was back then. Do you like the way the sport is now, or do you sometimes wish we need to be a little bit more carefree as we were?
Oh, look, I love the grid girls. I thought they were great colour for the event, and I think most people did. But Liberty just got a bit shy, I think, and thought, we don't want to put anyone offside, so better take the simple route where we don't run the risk of putting, I don't know, a certain sector of the market offside. No, it doesn't matter what I think anyway. We just work with whatever's there. We've got grid kids, and in some races we still do have women on the track. We have the Singapore Airlines hostesses, cabin crew, but they're not wearing bikinis or any skimpy outfits. I think MotoGP still does it though.
Yes, I do believe so. So have you done MotoGP?
No, I haven't. I think I would like to do a race, but I don't think there's ever a weekend where I'm anywhere near one and I'm not shooting F1.
But it's interesting now to see Formula One now being owned, and MotoGP owned by Liberty Capital, which is it's a big step for Liberty to own two of the biggest motorsport categories in the world. Do you think we'll get to a point where we'll see both Formula One and MotoGP run on the same weekend at a particular event?
No, I don't think that's possible because of tracks, is it? Don't they have to have different things for motorcycles?
Yeah.
I don't know enough about it, but no, I don't think so. I think they'd be cutting. I think that'd be a dumb move, because you can't get both crowds. Like, if you get 100,000 for that sport and 100,000 for F1, you can't put 200,000 in on the same day. You can only get maximum numbers because they're selling out anyway. F1, most races. It's a phenomenal business model.
I did read, as part of my little bit of research, your ultimate dream is to drive a Formula One car. Have you gotten close enough yet to get the opportunity to either be in a two-seater as a passenger or try and drive one?
No, and I think after reading an article about a guy who was a reasonable driver who got in one, and he said his first fast lap, he got to the corner and he put his foot on the brake and he was only doing about 40% of braking power, and he said he couldn't get his head up out of his lap. But he was around the corner before he could get his head up. No, I don't think I'd want to be in there, and I'm not even sure I want to be in the back of one. Last year I did in a few hot laps in a Ford at Kota, which was phenomenal. And then I did in a GT3 Porsche in Austria. And both of those were unbelievable experiences.
I've done a hot lap in a Ford Sierra years and years ago, like a Group A RS 500 Cosworth Sierra. My goodness, they go hard. And then I think the guy that owned it was an ex-Tony Longhurst Sierra, and I don't think it was even going that hard at the time. You might have been 70 or 80% at full speed. But my goodness, the turbo that kicked in and everything. I'm thinking this is the life for me. This is something I absolutely enjoyed, and I still remember that hot lap to this very day. I'm very lucky that I've had a couple of good hot laps. So actually, recently I did a hot lap around the new Blackrock motorsport resort facility with Toby Price, the Dakar winner. Let me tell you, Toby can fling that thing. And I know he's a big name in the Red Bull circles, but he can fling that thing. So, I have huge respect for those that really, go at that limit.
Well, I can tell you, I have actually driven the Melbourne circuit on race weekends twice. Once in my Evo 9 rally car,
Ooh.
and once in a go-kart challenge. I paid some money and did this go-kart challenge thing. But there were great opportunities. Not that you're ever going to set any lap records in those
Exactly.
cars.
But actually, I do want to mention you have done tarmac rallying, and you've been doing it on and off since 2005, and you did the Targ West rally. You've done it a number of times with your own team, and you've also entered a team in the Bathurst 12 Hour. Now, speaking of the Bathurst 12 Hour, we just had that in the last 24 hours, which BMW won. Of course, Valentino Rossi finished second in the most recent event. But in 2009, you entered a Evo 9 Lancer, and your team finished fifth outright.
Fifth, I thought it was sixth. I was saying a live stream the other day. I didn't drive, but I did do a hot lap on the media day that we had, and that was epic. But it was Aaron Karate, Steve Jones, and Kerry Wade.
That's right.
Yeah, we did pretty well. I think we had a wheel come off up the top or something at one stage. I wish I'd enjoyed that weekend a whole lot more. I had some drama in my business that time. And it was the only time ever, because we went out on the night before the race to have dinner. And it's the only time ever I've not been able to eat a meal because I just had some bad news keep coming about this drama in the office. And I thought, I can't even eat. But thankfully, that's all blown over. And what are we, 16 years later?
16 years later, yeah.
Forgotten about it. But yeah, I was watching the Daytona 24-hour bits of it the other day, the week before, and they kept saying, the Bathurst's on in a week's time. I have a link to that.
Yeah, it's really cool. I was there that year, actually. I was at the Bathurst 12 Hour as part of the broadcast commentary team on the PA system in 2009. That was a good race. That was a fun race too, because that was, I think, the second last year was for production cars before it went to GT3. So, and I'm a fan of like showroom production racing because I love the old adage of win on Sunday, sell on Monday. Is that something that you remember growing up when you watched car races in the past? Or
look, I didn't watch much as a young impressionable Aussie growing up, but I think Eric Banner raced that same race that we were at. Yeah.
He did two 12-hour races, and I actually was there in 2010 as well, and he crashed. Well, he wasn't in the car, but his teammate crashed the car in 2010, and they were on track to win the race as well. So yeah, it's a cruel place, Mount Panorama, but you got to love it. Did you enjoy doing the rally thing, or it wasn't really your thing?
Yeah, I did. I loved it. And I had a brilliant co-driver, Tony, a female Tony, and I loved driving with her, but then she decided she didn't want to do it anymore. And I had another guy called Matt Heskin from Victoria, lovely fella. He only did one rally with him, and then I struggled to get any good co-drivers. I thought you got to spend a lot of time in the car with these people. You want someone that you really love their company. Just couldn't find anyone, so I thought, bugger, I'll give it away.
Okay, would you do it again?
No.
Really?
No.
So, your racing career is done, was it?
I should be dead after my crash in the Rihanna section in Targa Tas one year.
Oh yes,
that was a shocker. Very, very fortunate to walk away out of that. Well, the car wasn't too.
Wow. So what happened? Like, what was the?
There was this three hills, three crests in a row, long straight. We're doing 210, and I thought there was another. There was confusion with the call. I thought there was another, a crest, and then a dip, and then another crest. So I'm going flat out. Then we get nearly to that. What I thought was the second last crest, turns out it's the last. And when you hit the top there, you go, frick, look at this, there's a bloody left-hander there. So anyway, I was the fastest person to take that corner by a mile that weekend, and I ended up in a paddock, and luckily there were no cows or buildings. No. Otherwise, it would have been a horrible scene.
Would you do Targa Tasmania again if you had the opportunity?
No, I wouldn't.
No?
I wouldn't.
Okay.
No. In the rallies I went in, there were 4 deaths. I was in the queue waiting to go when Brocky died. There were two other guys who died, I think, in a Porsche one year. And then there was another gentleman that I knew that died in a Targa Tasmania. It's hellishly dangerous, especially for someone like me who really has scant idea of what I'm doing.
I wouldn't say that. You've survived to tell the tale. But
I
actually,
survived it. Yeah, I survived it.
I do want to ask, and being serious for a moment, when you were saying before you were in the queue waiting to go out when you heard the news of Brock and his unfortunate passing.
Yep.
Do you remember the reaction when you first heard about it?
Oh, it was just, we were all incredulous because, and what we understand now is he arrived late, didn't have enough sleep perhaps. And we all drove through, I can't remember if we drove through the stage or not, but it was pretty surreal because it was all over the news and we were close to it. You know, I might have been 10 cars away from passing that same tree that took his life.
Wow. Yeah, there's not much else you can say about that. I still remember hearing about it, and I still just shake my head about what happened.
It's the most dangerous form of motor racing. That's the thing, because everywhere else there's fences and catch fences, and you're not typically going to come to a sudden stop, but a tree will do it.
Absolutely. Now, I'm interested, just one more thing before we move on. You said when you were growing up, you didn't really get into cars. What kind of changed for you? What was the one moment that got you into cars and go, yep, I want to give this a try?
It was the Daniel Ricciardo. My kids went to the same school as him in WA, and I just would listen to some races. I remember a couple of times I'd be going out to dinner on a Sunday night, and I would have it playing either, I don't know how I was listening to it, maybe on my phone. And I'd be quite excited because it was Daniel and he's a Perth guy and I had that connection. Not that I ever knew him then. And I just thought, well, okay, well, I've got an interest in Formula One because there's a Perth person in it. And then it just ramped up until I did that Red Bull thing. And after that, after actually watching the 2016 Grand Prix and having that experience, I contacted his dad, who's a businessman here, and I just said, you don't know me, but can I take you out to lunch and have a chat? I thought he might be able to shed some light on how the whole thing worked. And Joe's a beautiful man. In fact, I just contacted him today to see if he wanted to have lunch, but he's on Daniel's farm at the moment. And yeah, we got chatting and he just told me what he knew. And I thought, right, let's see what can happen. Look, I'm very lucky. And if I hadn't done the wildlife book, I don't think I would have got a gig with Formula One. And if I didn't have a marketing background, I probably wouldn't be there either. Because most people that want to get into photography are good photographers. And I can tell you, F1 doesn't need any more photographers. I think they need more people that have an audience that can market the sport for them. And that's what they look for. Because my picture of a car on track is little different to most everyone's pictures. There's some great guys, and I work alongside these guys. So when I think I take a great picture, I go, oh, look at that. And then I walk past and I see Clive Mason, Mark Thompson, Vladimir Reese, and I go, yeah, I'm not going to show anyone that picture because they are the very best. And that keeps you very grounded.
Of course.
And it also keeps you having to try new things. And every now and then I'll take a great picture and they'll say that's a great picture. But the number of great pictures I take is not the same as the number that the guys who've been doing it 40 years take. And I understand that, and I'm never, ever going to be in competition with them for that. But they can't market like I can market. So I've got to keep focusing on the stuff that I do better than anyone else.
And when you look at people that are very marketable, Daniel Ricciardo is one of those people. And you're very lucky to be within that Ricciardo inner circle, being Perth boys. What was it about Daniel that made him so likable to everyone, particularly in the United States, because he is so popular in the US?
Well, I guess Texas and Western Australia are very similar. And he has a love of the bush. And I think he just had an instant connection with that part of Texas, admittedly. And I'm not sure whether New York people would have any interest in him or not, but certainly he was huge in Texas, and I imagine California, that's where he's got a house as well.
Yeah.
Just a likeable guy, a bit silly, doesn't mind doing stupid things. And I like that about him, and I think the Americans like that about him, because in Formula One, it's very corporate now. You've got to be very careful what you say, and you have to always be thinking of the sponsors, whereas Daniel was perhaps a little bit more out there. you certainly wouldn't see Lewis doing the stuff that Daniel did.
Oh, absolutely not. No.
You wouldn't see Max doing it. Very few of them. Maybe Colapinto. He's a bit of a character. And Jack's funny. Jack's he's out there. When you get him alone, he's great value.
Well, I don't think you'll see I certainly don't think you'll see Lewis Hamilton doing anything that crazy. I mean, yes, he's very marketable as a high-end sports personality. We've seen him at the Met Gala and everything, but Daniel Ricciardo, I don't think you'll see him at the Met Gala anytime soon. Maybe
he did go.
Oh, he has done. Oh, yes, he has. You're right. He has done. But I think I would see him more at a NASCAR track than anywhere else. I think NASCAR now that his Formula One career's done, I think that's his future. Whether he'll take that up is up to him. But I think NASCAR is his calling, in my opinion.
I shot one NASCAR race 2 years ago in Nashville, and I interviewed Michael Jordan because he's a team owner.
That's
and right. When I interviewed, I had 3 questions to him, I think, but I managed to get him. No one else got him. Maybe it was my accent, I don't know. And I also interviewed Bubba Wallace. He's a funny guy. I said, "What makes these fans love you?" He said, "They don't love me, they hate me." Because I knew that it was a leading question. But I've done one NASCAR and I've done 2 IndyCar races, and I'm going to shoot another one this year because there's an IndyCar race the week after Miami, and it's a dead weekend for us, and I won't come home because it's too far. And I quite like Indianapolis. And I know a lot of the guys, Callum Ilott, Roman Grosjean, Marcus Ericsson, Pato O'Ward. And I get on really well with these guys. And the beauty of doing that event is that I can interview those guys on video. I can't video anyone at Formula One. My video rights is very clear that I can only shoot me. I must be the subject of the video. Can't show any cars on track. A driver can walk behind or say something to me, but I must be the subject of the video.
And it's very different, as you said, in the United States. What's the drivers' reactions like? Do they love getting that attention, that they're getting the publicity, particularly to the US audience when you're talking?
The F1 drivers?
Yes. Oh no, the Indy drivers. When you're talking to the Indy drivers.
Well, no, I think the Indy drivers like me because I have a largely F1 audience, and I think a lot of them want to be in F1, and so like Marcus Armstrong, he's more than happy to chat with me because he wants to be there. Pato wants to be there, and Pato and I get on famously. I love that kid. He's just a breath of fresh air. He's very much like Daniel. I've never seen anyone quite enjoy the adoration of the fans like Pato does.
He's great.
And the first time I met him was in Mexico, and I must have been 21 or 22, and he was walking in the paddock, and people were shouting, and he's jumping up and down and waving to him. Oh, who's this guy? So I went over and introduced myself, and since then we've been good friends and catch up. I did a signed print collaboration with him, which was surprising because I didn't think I'd sell that many, but we did all right. But yeah, I've got a very big F1 audience. It's 1.6 million in total across the 3 main platforms. And these guys need that exposure to that audience if they want to get into F1. I know Ericsson's already been there, as has Grosjean and Callum Ilott. He did a couple of practice runs. But yeah, it's an interesting game when you look at how this whole thing works, because they're all just normal guys. Lewis is the exception because he is the big show, and you rarely ever get a chance to chat with him because he is always on the move. He's always got security around and normally people chasing him. But occasionally, if it's Friday night drivers briefing and it's late, 10 o'clock, and he comes out, sometimes we'll catch up and walk, and I'll ask him a couple of things, but you never have an in-depth conversation with him. But he's always polite. All of them are polite. Because some people say, oh, which drivers are arrogant? None of them. Unless you get them after they've had a particularly awful race, and then you'd expect they can do whatever they want after that, I think. But no, I find them all to be quite gentlemanly.
Okay, I have to ask this. Is Lance Stroll as bad as people make him out to be?
Lance is a bit like, for me anyway, Lance and Sergio are just sort of laissez-faire walking down the paddock. They don't really care. They're not in it for the publicity. It's never rude. Like I've seen some vision of people in the past where they start shoving photographers and punching on, but no, none of that ever happens. They're not interested. They just got to get from here to here. They let you, no one ever stops. Well, some people stop you taking a photo, but that's typically after a bad race, and they'll just say, Kym, that's enough. And I go, okay, fine, and I'll walk away. But look, if they've had a bad race, Normally you don't go and shove a wide angle lens in their face. You'd shoot
Well, no.
70 to 200 and from 10 meters away with some other people, and you've got safety in numbers.
Yes, you do. But I was saying more so as a driver. Like, are you surprised? Like, a lot of people bag him because he's, I guess, not the well. He's just like making up numbers, or some say that he's making up numbers. But do you think he actually has enough talent to be there, to deserve to be there?
I don't know. I've got no idea. I know he's not very popular on my social media unless he's got a new girlfriend, in which case I might get 5,000 likes on a picture of Lance, but you put a girlfriend in there and suddenly 40,000. There's the same with a lot of the drivers. The women that they knock around with are often more popular than they are.
I've noticed that. I have noticed that big time. Like even like Oscar now with his girlfriend. Like they're both of them. They're just very happy. Just carry on their normal lives and
Yep.
everything. And
She's a delight too,
yeah.
Lily. A real British rose, quite dainty, petite, and I get on well with her.
All right. Last question before we move on to the more car questions. Will Oscar Piastri win a world championship?
You'd have to ask me after he wins it, and I'll say yes.
Good
I
point.
don't know. I don't know how good any of these guys are. What do you think?
I think he can. I interviewed him a few years ago for Trevor Long's podcast when he won the Formula 3 championship. And I was just blown away by how good he was in that COVID-affected year in 2020. He was so quick. And even with the issues with the DRS that were hampering him through much of the season, he just got on with it and he just drove like he wanted to win that championship. And he did it the same year and the next year in 2021 in Formula 2. I honestly believe he can win the world championship. He's a very modest guy, very quiet, but he's serious. Like he means business, and I think he can win the world championship.
I had dinner with him in Baku going back a few years ago with his trainer, Kym Illman, also an Australian. And at the time I thought he's very mousy. Didn't say too much. He was a bit like a shy schoolboy. But
Yes.
look, he's obviously drive. And I think this year, now that perhaps they're more level in ability, but the two of them, that he might put some pressure on Lando, and who knows, it could end up being a fight between the two of them, which of course most of the public would love to see. They like a bit of drama in their racing, and
They want to see
perhaps
a Prost Senna like they did back in the
maybe they do. Yeah. Maybe they do. I'm not sure either of those are quite that hungry, but I could be wrong.
This is the Motor Dream Podcast.
You're someone that is into cars to some degree, but I guess you could say you're a late bloomer. But I want to learn a little bit more about what makes you tick as a bit of a late bloomer when it comes to cars. So I want to ask you, the first car that you drove.
The first car I drove was the VW Beetle. I learned to drive in that, and my mother would take me down to the Marion Shopping Centre in Adelaide, and we'd run around the car park there, and inevitably it'd end with a big fight, and one of us would get out of the car screaming. And then my first car I ever bought was a yellow Mitsubishi Magna. And I'd made quite a bit of money buying and selling silver, and I paid cash for it at about 19. So that was my first car that I drove and owned.
Oh, a yellow. Was it canary yellow or was it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and I bought a flash stereo system for it too, and I thought I was pretty cool.
I mean, it could be worse. It could have been a Holden Chimera. I mean, you could have been struggling.
I had one. I had a brown one in Darwin. What was I thinking? Then I sold that for not an E-Type, a Mazda RX-7, a white one, which I loved.
Oh, wow. Well, good thing you got rid of the RX-7 because I interviewed Blair Jocelyn, who is from Mighty Car Mods and also from Top Gear, and he said he owned a Holden Chimera, first car, when he was about 19, and he said it was another piece of you-know-what. So you probably thought the same thing and got rid of it as quickly as you could when you were in Darwin.
Very plastic car, I remember that. It wasn't in keeping with my image as the breakfast announcer on the commercial radio station.
That's a fair point. Do you remember the first road trip that you remember going on when you were growing up in Adelaide?
What, that I drove?
Well, no, first road trip.
Look, I would travel to Victor Harbour just about every weekend because my grandparents lived there. My dad had a company car. I think it was a I can't even remember what we had, but road trips, no, I didn't do them.
Really? Okay.
No.
Because you're doing Victor Harbour nearly every weekend, so
Yeah, as a kid working on the Granite Island train.
nice, nice. The first time you remember changing a tyre, do you remember that?
No, but I'll tell you about the last time I was in
Please.
Africa, and these girls pulled up next to us in our safari vehicle, and they said, "Can you help us? Our tyres punctured." And so we're in the middle of a game park, so there's lions, there's cheetahs, all sorts, not within close range, but yeah, we had to all get out and help her change her tyre. Well, there's three girls from France, and it was a very funny scenario. It's in fact it's in one of my videos, one of my YouTube videos recently.
Oh, I'll have to have a look at that. We'll put the link up
Mm.
in the show notes in regards to that. But I'm sure it'd be quite entertaining.
It
Uh,
is.
what's the kind of music you listen to when you go traveling to a Grand Prix event? Because I know you're a musician in the background. I can see there's a lot of instruments in the background. But what's your taste in
Yes.
music?
Look, I'll listen to dance music. I'll listen to Steely Dan. I'll listen to look, pretty much everything across the board. I must admit, I'm a little bit lazy in finding new music. I'll just pretty much go to whatever I like. Whereas occasionally I'll find something new and like, oh, I should have heard that long ago. But yeah, look, a bit of everything. I'm even rock and roll and classical from time to time.
Okay, but you're a DJ in a past life, so
Yeah.
like a radio DJ. So was top 40 like the thing that you were doing back in the 80s, or?
Huge. I used to DJ at nightclubs as well. So I have a love of music. I wish I played the piano better. I did when I was about 15. I think I did grade 7 in piano, and I was pretty bloody good back then.
Hmm.
But I've got now a grand piano here in one in my Perth house, but I rarely play them, and it's embarrassing, really. I can play the start of Steely Dan's, oh, what's that song?
Reeling in the Years?
No, 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 no. It's it's off the movie, the album Gaucho. Anyway, it's quite a tricky piece, as most Steely Dan songs are.
Yes.
And I did make an effort to learn the intro, but of course, once you get into the chorus, it just gets way more difficult, and I gave up. As I do a lot, I can play the opening of a lot of songs and no song all the way through.
I've only got 3 guitars. You can't see them, but they're in behind. And they're both, 2 of them are Brian May guitars. I am a Queen fan, which I openly admit to. And yeah, I'm not the best guitarist. I can play rhythm, but I can't do lead, and I'm just shocking. And I think I'm at the point like you. I just give up. So I just sit there as museum pieces as far as I'm concerned.
Babylon Sisters was that song, if you
okay.
happen to look it up.
Okay,
I love it.
good to know. I'll have to have a listen to that. Babylon Sisters. All right. Did you get your license first go when you were learning to drive?
Oh, it's such a long time ago. I think I did. I'll say yes.
Okay, we'll allow that. And what about eating in cars? Is that a yes or a no?
Eating?
Eating in
Oh,
cars.
yeah. You should see. I've got a FJ Cruiser down here, which I love. It's got that much sand on the bottom. It's got stuff all through it. It goes in the ocean to launch jet skis most weekends, or quiet days on the water. So yeah, I'm not at all worried about eating in cars.
Fair point. I understand. You've owned a number of cars. You mentioned you had a Mazda RX-7 in the past. You've owned, obviously, that Magna and a Chimera. And I've read that you recently owned a Porsche 911. I think it was in the West Australian.
Just about to sell it.
What?
Just about to sell it because I drive it 3 times a year from Lancelin to Perth and back, and it sits in a garage, and I don't drive the thing. So funny you should say that, because today I actually rang up Chillingworth and said I want to sell this thing. So if any of your fans here want to buy a 911 Turbo from, it must be 16 years old, in perfect condition, 93,000 Ks, it's available.
Put it out
But
there.
that's not my first one. I had before that another 911 soft top, and before that another 911, and before that a Boxster.
So you're a Porsche man, quite obviously.
Yeah, my wife's got a Cayenne, and
Ooh,
she
okay.
gave her Macan to my son. So my unemployed 24-year-old son drives a Porsche.
You said it. You said it. So
Yeah.
of those cars, which is the best car that you've actually owned in your lifetime?
Uh, Oh, look, that 911 Turbo is something special when you put your foot down.
Yeah.
Funny thing, I bought it in Queensland because the stamp duty was much cheaper, and I had a house there, and they delivered it and put it in the garage, and then we flew over, and I got there on a Friday night or Saturday morning, and I go out there and I get the key and I put it in and it jams. The key jams. So it wasn't the Porsche key. It was a Toyota key. And once you jam it in there, you can't get it out. So I had to wait until the dealership opened on a Monday with this brand new 911 Turbo with the wrong key stuck in the ignition.
Oh, no.
It was very sad.
I've done that. I've actually jammed the wrong key in the... I must tell this story. I didn't get my license first go, but... but I laugh about it now. But the car that I was doing my test in, it was a Mazda 323, and it was from the 70s, late 70s. And for some reason, I put the wrong key. I thought I put the right ignition key in, and I couldn't turn that over. It was jammed. I'm looking. Oh no! I've put the wrong key in the ignition. I think it was a house key or something, or something similar. Or it was from another car, and I just couldn't turn it over. We eventually got it out, but I flunked my test. And I'm like, oh geez. So I know the pain, exactly what you've gone through when you put the wrong key into the ignition and you can't go anywhere. It's so embarrassing.
And a brand new $353,000 car 16 years ago.
Oh no, that's embarrassing. But I understand your pain. It's very, very painful. What about the worst car that you've owned? I'm sure there's some.
Camaro.
Yep.
That
okay.
brown Camaro.
Okay, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
There's a guy from Speed Cafe, and he knows Andrew Van Leeuwen, who's also from Western Australia. He's also from Speed Cafe. There's a guy by the name of Former Legend, and that's all he goes by. I don't know his real name, but he's called Former Legend, and he loves Holden Camaros. So I don't know why.
He's easy to please. I did have a red Mazda RX-6, which I loved. And I also, for a while, had a Prelude, which was a great car.
Oh, nice.
Then, when I came to Perth, I came down here with the RX-7, I think, and I decided I wanted to buy a house. So I sold the RX-7, and then I ended up buying this bunky old big Mercedes monster. I don't even know what model it is, but I drove that around for a while. That and a scooter when I was working at Channel 9. So I've come a long way since then, but it was far better to put your money into a house than it is into a car.
That is true. That is true.
Yeah.
All right. Last question before we move on to the Dream Garage. Do you name your cars? And if so, no?
Nope.
Don't do them.
No, and we call them, because sometimes Tonya will say, which car? I go, the blue one. The silver one. I don't call them by the name. It's just the colour because it's easier to remember.
Okay, well, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Actually, I just want to ask one more question before we do move on to that Dream Garage. What is the plan for you to get your new car? Like, you're obviously selling the 911, the silver one.
Mm-hmm.
But what are you looking at potentially getting?
Well, my dream car, because I already bought one of them. It's a Tesla. We bought one. One of my staff comes up here 3 times a week, and she takes this Targa, which was a great car, and it's costing us $350 a week in fuel for her to come backwards and forwards. So we thought, right, we'll get a Tesla, and I'd always been quite against them, and so we bought one. And we love it. It's phenomenal. What it does, it drives itself just about on the highway. It's cheap because we just power the thing up with solar power when she's here doing her work, and then she takes it back in the afternoon. So, look, I really love them. And I was always against them. So you're going to ask me my dream garage. I'm going to get another one of those, I think.
Okay.
If indeed I need one. I don't
if you need one. Well, let's get into the Dream Garage then, because what I was going to tell you was you wake up one morning and even with your successes as a businessman and as a photographer, and you've done very well for yourself, you still get a message saying check your bank balance, and you check your bank balance and you've become an instant billionaire. Even with all your successes, you still get this money and you don't know what to do with it. But then you get this email from this mystery benefactor, and it tells you that you can buy any car, bike, or machine that you want, but you're only allowed 3 in your dream garage. Now, we've already declared the Tesla is going into that dream garage, and you've given your reasons why. Which particular model Tesla would you have in your dream garage?
The one that's quick off the mark. What's that one? The fast one. Because this one's not that fast. This is 0 to 100 in about 7. But it goes from 60 to 100 like that. It's phenomenal. This is the 5-seater with the big boot.
I think it must be the here we go. Is it the Tesla Roadster or something? It must be, or the Model S.
I know.
There's
Don't know.
the Tesla
Whatever
Roadster.
the fast one is.
I think it is the Tesla Roadster. It goes from 0 to 100 in 1.9 seconds.
Yeah, that's it. That's the one. I'll have that.
Tesla Roadster, here you come. That's okay.
Yeah.
Look, I don't mind the Tesla. I'm not a big fan per se. I think in terms of cost, I think to buy one brand new is exorbitant. But for what they've done, like to really transform the thinking of what an EV vehicle is all about, I have to give them credit for changing everyone's thinking. It is we're now seeing a lot more EV vehicles, but we need the infrastructure to be there to make it much more sustainable than what we've got right now. That's the only downfall of EV vehicles, in my opinion.
Right. My second car,
yes,
I know you're going to get onto that.
Yes, please do.
A brand new FJ Cruiser, because as you know, they don't make them anymore, so I can't get a new one. But the one I've got now, I don't even know whether I get another one, because I take this out on the dunes, I take it through the bush. If you buy a brand new one, straight away, you first scratch, you get, I've scratched my car. This is so scratched already. It's already got 120,000 Ks on the clock. I stick it in the ocean. It's just a great piece of kit. And quite frankly, it's lovely to drive to Perth because it's high up, it's reasonably quiet. Like to drive my 911 Turbo to Perth with the low profile tyres and the road we have here, it's just unbelievably loud and not in any way comfortable.
Doesn't sound comfortable at all, particularly if you drive on roads around Sydney as well, because I'm from Sydney, and even the roads around like outer fringes of Sydney, you try and drive something like a 911, it would drive you mad with the low profile tyres. So yeah, but FJ Cruiser, that's an interesting choice. No one's mentioned the FJ Cruiser.
I love it. I love it.
It just reminds me of those old Land Cruisers from the 70s. That's a good choice. I do like that.
I've got roof racks on the top, so I can pull up somewhere. I can climb easily up onto the roof and take photos from a high vantage point. And then I've got this extendable photo pole that I can put a camera up easily 8 meters, 9 meters, and I can remote control shoot. So I can get what looks like a helicopter shot from a camera on the end of a pole. And that's in this big, long, white, looks like a tradies thingo. And then I've got all the back decked out in camera drawers. So it's all set up for me.
That's really, really cool. And look, the FJ Cruiser stopped in 2014, but if you can get one that's in good condition, I mean, who cares if you had to scratch it? But I mean, my goodness, I like it.
It's appreciated too. That car will get me more now than what I paid for it.
Yeah, I agree.
That's not the case with my Porsche.
You know what? I don't mind the FJ Cruiser. I don't mind Toyotas. The Toyotas are not necessarily my favourites, but I do like the FJ Cruiser because it does remind me of what the old Land Cruisers were meant to be, and they are so, so cool. What is the third car that you would have in your dream garage?
Zach Brown's car. He drives a Speedster. Speedtail, McLaren Speedtail.
Ooh.
It's that one-seater in the middle and then two behind. And he drives it most years to Silverstone, and every driver that walks past it stops. Most of the team principals that walk past it stop and have a look inside. And it's a phenomenal looking thing. It's almost like a futuristic Batman type car.
Oh, I'm just looking at it now. It looks absolutely amazing. So for those, I didn't know about this car. Obviously, I've known about the McLaren F1 and obviously the subsequent cars that have been built since then. We've seen in GT3 racing and the like, but a hybrid sports car as well. So only 106 were produced. So it's a direct successor to the McLaren Senna, the 720S and the like. 4-litre V8 with a hybrid motor attached to it, producing for the electric motor 306 horsepower. But the actual motor, combine that, and that's like 1,036 brake horsepower, or about 772 kilowatts. My God, I can understand why Zach would like to drive that to the British Grand Prix.
What's the 0 to 100 on that?
0 to 100. Let's have a look at that. I'm just trying to find that now. So here we go, 0 to 100 for the McLaren Speedtail.
I reckon 2.2, maybe. That's
100.
my guess.
Here we go.
No.
0 to 100 miles per hour, 5.1 seconds. So that's 160 kilometres. 0 to 60 miles or 100 Ks is 2.9 seconds.
2.9.
2.9
sluggish.
seconds. It's a bit sluggish compared to the Tesla Roadster. I think your Tesla would have...
Yeah.
That's
Anyway,
that's
what you can expect to see in my garage if I suddenly decide I want to stack it up with crazy cars.
Well, I like it. I've got to say, like, I do like the McLaren. I think you know what? I could see myself on that McLaren. That is a really, I don't know, there's just something about it I like. It's really, really cool. But when you put it up against the FJ Cruiser and then the Tesla Roadster, that's not too bad. That's not a bad garage at all. And I'm very, very impressed. I like how people can be a bit different with their choices. It's really, really cool. And your choices are fantastic. So thank you so much for agreeing to come onto the podcast. It's been an absolute joy to talk to you. And I can't wait to see some of the photography that you do throughout the season during 2025. Well done on what you've done as well, not just as a photographer, but also as a businessman. And I wish you all the very best for your future endeavours. I can't wait to see what you do in 2025.
I'm excited about the season, and your people should go to YouTube and Instagram and even TikTok and search Kym Illman, Kym with a Y, and I'll look forward to having them on board following my journeys around the world in 25.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Kym. It's been a pleasure to have you on.
Ciao, Connor.
Like I said in my introduction, Kym Illman is a very interesting yet very intelligent man. Whilst he's no expert on Formula One by his own admission, his insights certainly were entertaining, and since our chat, there's been quite a movement within the Formula One paddock. Liam Lawson, gone from Red Bull after 2 races and demoted to Racing Bulls. Carlos Sainz, he's been beaten on a number of occasions by his Williams teammate Alex Albon. And Jack Doohan, he was given the flick at Alpine after those first 6 races that he mentioned, though he remains as a reserve driver. And we both picked McLaren leading the World Championship, but we remain split on which driver would be leading. As of the Spanish Grand Prix, it's Oscar Piastri who leads Lando Norris by 10 points heading into the Canadian Grand Prix in 2 weeks' time. Oh, and his dream garage. I can give or take about the Tesla, but the Toyota FJ Cruiser and the McLaren Speedtail, more specifically Zach Brown's own Speedtail, what a contrast. Practicality to carry your surfboards to the beach against the brute force of the McLaren supercar. As you can appreciate, Kym is a very unique human, and it was certainly a joy to chat with him on this podcast. You can follow Kym on Instagram, TikTok and YouTube, and you can buy his prints, photo books and merchandise through his website at www.kymillman.com. Speaking of websites, the show website is www.themotordream.com.au, where you can listen to past episodes, information on each of our guests, and also on the show itself. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram with the handle The Motor Dream, and you can start a conversation about your dream garage by using the hashtag The Motor Dream. Or better still, drop us a line on what your dream garage would be at themotordream@beastproductions.com.au. Lastly, make sure to like and subscribe to wherever you listen to your podcasts, be it Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or YouTube Music. Thanks for listening to the Motor Dream podcast, and remember to please drive or ride safely out on the roads wherever you go. We'll be back in a couple of weeks' time where my guest will be Australian rally superstar, Extreme E champion and media personality, Molly Taylor. Until then, we'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Motor Dream podcast. This series is proudly produced by Beast Productions.